This broad calls up from the joint and she says she wants 2 feds whacked.
She could be extremely malevolent, intimidating, threatening. If you're trying to fake mental illness, wow, hearing voices. Everybody knows that when you're hearing voices, you have to be crazy. Okay, B, every day at noon, the devil tells me kill someone.
Enter the world of forensic science, the science of crime, where a suspect's guilt or innocence can hang on a single piece of evidence.
Nobody should die that way.
I've never seen anything that horrific.
One of the duties of a pathologist is to determine the cause of death.
Watch on mobile devices or the big screen. All for free. No subscription required. Download Veely now.
She fleeced a host of banks and stiffed the finest New York stores for over $50 million. She was the consummate con artist, the queen of cons, a cross between Garbo and Grace Kelly with the moxie of a superhero. Her name was Lily Schmidt, and she had over 40 different aliases. She could morph without effort from helpless child to decrepit old crony to elegant Park Avenue socialite.
You could see Lily on a Monday and literally not recognize her on a Wednesday. She changes disguises as if she was a magician.
Lily was what is known as a paper hanger, a con artist who forges or counterfeits official documents, checks, securities, and passports. The first time Lily was arrested for forgery, she was sent to New York's notorious Rikers Island. She escaped by posting bail with a forged check. It took authorities 2 years to catch up with her. Lily ended up serving 2.5 years in the federal prison in Lexington, Kentucky. When she got out of prison, Lily headed for the bright lights of New York City. That's where she met and married Lenny, a felonious soulmate with a taste for luxury. What they lacked in scruples, they made up for in panache. Just when they seemed on top of the world, they were nabbed by 2 federal agents. Once again, Lily found herself in Rikers Island. Given how she had embarrassed them before with a forged check, this time she was refused bail.
Lily definitely rates in my top 5 as a very dangerous woman who, again, dangerous because she will not stop to further her criminal career.
It was while in jail that Lily raised the stakes. She engineered a plan to have the 2 federal agents who arrested her bumped off and make her escape. She was caught and charged with their attempted murder. Lily's legal defense: mental incompetence. She claimed she was out of her mind when she planned the murder. If it was true, Lily would be sent to a psychiatric hospital for 6 months instead of a federal prison for life. But was it true? Throughout her criminal career, Lily Schmidt had been assessed by a legion of psychiatrists and doctors.
You had half of the doctors saying she's got every illness known to man, and you had half of them saying she's faking.
Barbara Kerwin, a forensic psychologist, was given the task of determining Lily's sanity. Dr. Kerwin had a reputation as being somewhat of a fake buster. If Lily couldn't convince Kerwin of her mental incompetence, the queen of cons would be an old woman before she ever set foot in Tiffany's again.
When I first finally got in to see Lily, I was smart enough to bring a can of soda with me as kind of a peace offering. And in a correctional setting, chewing gum, cigarettes, sodas, pretty hard to come by. I was rather surprised at her physical appearance. Because I had read a lot of the police arrest records, I had read the descriptions of witnesses who had been victims of her cons, I had seen some of the photographs, and they clearly looked as if they had come out of the pages of Vogue. She sort of looked like a wreck of her former self. You could see the bare bones of what must have been a devastatingly attractive woman, and that probably actually explains some of the power she had to get over on people. Lily was on to me much faster than I was on to her. And I could see in the beginning that she was starting to hustle me, almost like a carny. Trying to find, I think, areas where she could garner sympathy, where she could make a connection with me, emotional hotspots, kind of the classic ones like, do you have any children? And then talking about the fact that she loved children, she wanted to have children, she had all these terrible miscarriages and rapes, which of course were never substantiated. She would talk about God. She would ask me if I believed in God. Did I pray? I was doing this difficult work of judging. Did I pray for infusion from the Holy Spirit? All in the service of being able to convince me, get me on her side, and make me go in there and do what she wanted me to do, which was to say, as the government's witness, this woman is worthy of sympathy and treatment. We should suspend her sentence and put her in a nice government hospital.
Lily talked continuously for 3.5 hours. She wept as she spoke of her abusive father and her terrible childhood in Bulgaria. She clenched her fists in rage as she recounted the injustices her family suffered at the hands of the communists. She recounted the joys and pains of her many love affairs and numerous marriages. But it was obvious the great love of her life had been her last husband, Lenny. When Lily and Lenny hooked up, it was a marriage of hearts, spirits, and criminal talents. Whereas each before was a small-time forger, together they aimed for the big time. Their plan was daring. Their target, one of the most secure buildings in the U.S., the Pentagon. While supposedly on tour of the Pentagon, they slipped through a cordoned-off security area and made their way to the office of Head of Security, Colonel Michael King. They filched his credit card and driver's license. Back in their penthouse, Lenny doctored the ID, made up a companion ID for Lily, and voila. Lenny became Colonel Michael King and Lily, his wife, Mrs. Courtney King. Then, armed with this impeccable Defense Department ID, Lily and Lenny set off to bite off as much of the Big Apple as they could stuff into their hungry mouths. As Barbara Kerwin assessed Lily's mental state, she was trying to determine if she was crazy or simply crazy as a fox. It would take all of Dr. Kerwin's savvy to know when Lily was telling the truth and when she was conning.
You could almost feel like you were living the pages of a James Bond novel. I mean, she had even conned the chief of security of the Pentagon. So, you know, it became almost fantastic, and you had to anchor it.
As Colonel and Mrs. Michael King, Lily bragged that she and Lenny bagged about $100,000 a day. They targeted banks and financial institutions, opened lines of credit and bank accounts, all of which gave them access to immediate cash. One of their favorite schemes was creating forged certified checks. Somehow they decided that $70,000 was a magic amount. Then they would go into a prestigious New York store, eye some expensive item, flash their Defense Department ID as Colonel and Mrs. Michael King, and pay for the items with one of their bogus $70,000 certified checks. Their lifestyle was that of a royal couple.
If I were doing marriage counseling with them, I would have to say that this was a perfect match. It seemed to be one of the few enduring human relationships that Lily had.
Lily and Lenny never realized that their dream world was about to fall to earth when the real Michael King began getting bills from purchases he'd never made and irate letters about lines of credit he'd never opened. He notified the Department of Criminal Justice. Investigators began tracking Lily and Lenny's exploits. They realized that most of their scams took place along New York's fabled Fifth Avenue, so federal agents handed out flyers to merchants and security officers in the area with a description of the pair. It was a Friday. As Lily and Lenny got ready, they had no idea what lay in store for them. Lily had the certified check with her. Lenny had a gun. It promised to be another typical high-stakes free shopping spree, but a security guard recognized them from the flyer. He called the law. Lily and Lenny sensed trouble before they saw it. They decided to abandon their plan and get away. Lily wanted to duck into a store. Lenny urged her to stay with him. Ironically, if she'd followed her hunch, she might have eluded capture. By staying with Lenny, she ran straight into the law. Lenny got away, but was picked up a few days later. Lily was sent to Riker's Island. This is when she planned the murder of the two federal agents, which is what eventually brought her face to face with Dr. Kerwin. Here's how it all unfolded. She knew that the same two federal agents who were spearheading the government's case against her also drove her to court appearances. She also knew that she had a scheduled court date on June 24th. What if on that day she could get rid of them and gain her freedom? She sussed out a fellow inmate who had mob connections. After some small talk, Lily mentioned she was looking to hire some hitmen. She offered the inmate a $50,000 finder's fee. Lily's contact bit and provided a phone number.
This broad calls up from the joint and she says she wants 2 feds whacked. Me and my boys have to do the job at this point. We're assigned to do this job.
Then she sketched out her plan. She knew every detail of how she wanted the hit to go down.
She was really the mastermind. It was a pretty slick princess here. She had us times, dates, places where these cops stayed, and it made it easy for us once we had the other stuff, which we had on ice already, to walk up on these guys and whack them right out.
When they stopped on that June 24th morning, the hitman would come at the federal agents quickly using silencers. At least that was the plan. The plan that would take Lily Schmidt from consummate con artist to consummate murderer. What Dr. Kerwin would have to determine was whether this was the plan of a crazy woman or a cold-blooded killer. June 24th rolled around, the day the two federal agents would be hit, and Lily would make her escape.
This broad, we call her Princess, she had us dress up as policemen, as cops. And we walk up to the car. Once we get the drop on the feds, we shoot them in the head. And we get in and we break her out of jail. This broad says to me, where's the regular guy? And she's like, almost like shaken to death. I said, what do you mean, where's the regular guy? I am the regular guy. She knew that the job that the two feds were whacked, that I was the guy.
During the car ride, Tony told her about the hit, how they'd come upon the federal agents as they stopped for coffee, how easy it had been to whack them.
She wanted me to run her enterprise. She needed a button guy. She needed a guy who could steal with a gun. All she could do was paper. Her and her old man did paper. So I told her, when we get done with this deal, we'll talk about other deals. We got to see the money. She didn't get no play from us until she got to the safe site, the hotel room.
Lily rejoiced over the success of her plan and bragged, "My idea was great, right? I told you those two were clowns, baby. 23 and 24-year-olds.
She wanted to know how we whacked them, how they took it. Did they die bad? I told her they died like dogs. They got it in the bubatsa. They got it right in the head. Quick. Shoot them right in the head. Make them die. She was excited. Just crazy broad. Loved it. She loved it.
The hitmen waited for Lily's associate to show up with their $500,000. But the only people who showed were federal agents. They arrested Lily, Tony, and his partner. Unfortunately for Lily, the whole scene had been videotaped, and Tony and his cohort, it turned out, were federal marshals acting in an undercover capacity.
Well, there was one thing that Lily never really figured out, that I'm not Tony 2 times. I'm Bob Leshorn, Deputy United States Marshal in deep cover. And Lily just couldn't put it together, because it's the first time in Lily's life that she's ever been conned. The con got conned.
So instead of murdering 2 federal agents, Lily was arrested and charged with their attempted murder, which carried the same penalties as murder. Lily claimed that she'd been set up and that she was only kidding about killing the agents. Besides, she hadn't been in her right mind about the whole thing.
The truly mentally ill do not commit crimes with an accomplice. They don't have a collaborator like Lily had Lenny, or Lily dealt with supposed hitmen to take out the federal agents. Because the nature of severe psychotic mental illness is such that it alienates people from communicating with other people. So in that regard, Lily was making clear choices, and that's the issue of criminal responsibility.
So Lily was judged to have been in her right mind when she planned the hit on the 2 federal agents. But the con artist had one more con up her sleeve.
When I first saw her, we were talking about an issue in the past. Was she so mentally ill before that she shouldn't be convicted of the crime? She lost that round. She was convicted. So now we're at the next round, the last round. Is she so mentally ill that even though she's responsible for the crime, it's inhumane to put her in a prison? So now she has to become mentally ill right at this moment in time. So the mouse moved in.
Lily told one examiner that she saw a mouse walking on the walls of her cell. The mouse laughed at her and told her she was hopeless and that everyone was against her. "How pitiful you are," the mouse declared. That's when Barbara Kerwin persuaded Lily's defense attorney to administer the HSAS test, the Hidden Schizophrenia Attitude Scale.
The issue always in a forensic case is telling the fakers from the real thing. The difference about the HSAS is that there's very little wiggle room. You must choose between 2 alternatives, each of which is sort of bizarre sounding, may not describe your behavior, counterintuitive. The correct answer, so to speak, to either appear sane or to appear insane is not apparent even in the wording of the statement. You will start with the sentence stem, about hearing voices, and you must choose either A, this is something that has never happened to me, Or B, every day at noon, the devil tells me, kill someone. Now, if you're normal and you have no reason to want to distort, most likely you're going to pick A. This is something that's never happened to me. If you're trying to fake mental illness, wow, hearing voices. Everybody knows that when you're hearing voices, you have to be crazy. Okay, B, every day at noon, the devil tells me, kill someone. I have given this test to hospitalized schizophrenics, and they looked at answer B, and one of them said to me, I don't know which way to answer because the devil does tell me to kill, but not every day it's at noon. He tells me that periodically on sort of every other Sunday.
Lily obtained the highest score anyone had ever had for faking.
Lily was not having voices tell her to kill federal agents. She wasn't having a delusion that the federal agents were trying to kill her and she had to do this in self-defense. Lily had a clearly articulated plan, and the goal was to suit her purposes of getting out of jail.
In the end, the judge decided that although Lily might seem to exhibit some of the symptoms of schizophrenia, her behavior was better explained as faking symptoms in an effort to appear schizophrenic. Lily Schmidt was sentenced to 30 years in prison for attempted murder.
Lily Schmidt is an extremely dangerous career criminal because she will stop at nothing. You get up in the morning, you get dressed, you go to work, whatever your profession is, you're proud of it. Lily is proud to be a criminal. If Lily gets to a telephone, someone's in trouble. This is the con's con.
She never grew up, and in fact, that's a way to look at Lily without perhaps romanticizing her, that she was like a willful, pampered, and very precocious child playing with the world and people's lives as if she were playing in a dollhouse. She will never have security. She will never have the family that she used to fantasize about. She'll have a penitentiary, an infirmary, a series of various jails as she comes through the 30 years of her sentence. And at some point in time, and this is the real tragedy, and when it really will hit her, is she will be nearly a 70-year-old lady given a suitcase and $30 and a set of clothes and put out on the street. And all she knows is conning. And we'll see what works for a 70-year-old con artist.
It is one thing to like and admire and even relish the escapades of a con artist, but when the ante is up to murder and the individual tries to escape the consequences through a psychological loophole, fascination turns to disdain. Lily Schmidt was a consummate con artist, but in the end, she couldn't con the system. A bizarre religious cult with medieval rituals. A young couple and their baby who've escaped. 2 charred bodies found in a mysterious fire. A scene of brutality, unlike anything investigators have encountered before. Enter the world of forensic science, the science of crime, where a suspect's guilt or innocence can hang on a single piece of evidence. What happens when a homicide investigator and a specialist in arson are called to a scene of destruction so confusing that nothing makes any sense? The more they learn, the more mysterious and dangerous it becomes. On the morning of October 4th, 1994, Residents of Morin Heights, a town in the Laurentian Mountains north of Montreal, notice fire coming from one unit in a chalet complex. When firemen arrive, they find all the doors and windows locked from the inside. They find 2 charred bodies in the bedroom, one stretched out on an incinerated bed, the other on the floor nearby. Leading the investigation for Quebec police is Detective Jacques Saint-Pierre.
After looking over the crime scene, we realized it was going to be a difficult one to figure out. The scene was quite unusual. It was the first time I'd seen one like that.
He is aware that the chalets are owned by leaders of a mysterious religious cult. And amidst the ashes, they find a large gold pendant bearing the insignia of the Solar Temple cult. They also find scorched aluminum baking pans in the burned chalet. Arson specialist Carol Rousseau arrives on the scene.
In a corner, we found a homemade fire-starting device. It was strange, finding this aluminum pan on which a heating element had been placed. Beside the pan, on the floor, was a thermostat, which had been programmed through a timer of some sort.
In the basement, police find a door leading to an adjacent chalet, also owned by the cult. Another homemade device is found. This house has not been damaged by the fire. Upstairs in the living room, a strange arrangement of household items gets Carol's attention.
There were chairs and bags, garbage bags, that you noticed, on touching them, had some liquid inside. Placed under this, we found yet another fire-starting device. It was troubling to see all that. Why all this preparation? Why put the liquid in the bags and attach the bags to the chairs?
The liquid from the pan and the garbage bags is analyzed. It is shown to be gas and diesel fuel.
The goal must have been to create a fire big enough to destroy everything.
A woman who appears to be more than a curious bystander arrives on the scene. She is distressed. She's looking for her friends, the Descharmes family, a couple in their 20s with a young baby.
She asked me whether it could have been that young family that we found in the fire.
She's secretive, but she does tell Saint-Pierre that she and the Descharmes had been followers of the Solar Temple cult, and that the Descharmes recently pulled out of the cult at about the same time she did. When the charred bodies are sent to the morgue, the autopsy and dental findings suggest the victims are a 60-year-old woman and a 35-year-old man. Clearly, they are not the Descharmes. Toxicology results indicate sedatives in both victims' bodies. Saint-Pierre considers what little he knows about the Solar Temple, that it's a secretive cult based on a medieval order with a strong belief in reincarnation. He also knows that they have centers both in Quebec and in Switzerland. The morning after the fire, before he can even begin to lay out a plan for his investigation, Saint-Pierre is hit with stunning front-page news. 50 people have been found dead at an apparent mass suicide murder in Switzerland, all of them members of the Solar Temple cult. Some bodies have bullet wounds to the head. The case has suddenly gone from a local incident to a major international one.
We made contact with Swiss police to determine whether connections could be made between the two fires.
Carol Rousseau is informed that incendiary devices have been discovered at the solar temple scene in Switzerland too. She immediately contacts Swiss forensic scientists to share information. It appears the devices in Switzerland are constructed in a similar way to those she found.
It was really bizarre. Why so many sophisticated devices? I had seen all kinds of incendiary devices, but none as complicated as this.
She needs to examine them closely, hoping to determine how the fires were set and whether this is a case of suicide, murder, or both. The case is bigger and more baffling than any investigator Jacques Saint-Pierre has ever encountered.
If I'm given a piece of paper and it's written in French, I can understand it. But if it's written in Chinese, I won't understand any of it. In the solar temple crime scene, it was exactly as though I'd been given that piece of paper with the Chinese written on it. And it was completely incomprehensible to me.
It would be weeks before his many questions would even begin to be answered. 2 unidentified bodies burned to death, each found with sedatives in them. Strange homemade incendiary devices, a missing family, and 50 dead bodies in Switzerland. Investigators are mystified. Detective Saint-Pierre desperately needs answers. He searches the adjoining chalet, the one with the unburned fire devices. There, an ident officer finds evidence of what might be bloodstains on the floor of the downstairs bathroom. A blood expert is called in to do further tests.
When we arrived there, well, it looked like it was clean. It didn't look like anything suspicious had happened.
This is the ideal situation for Andre Munch to do what is known as a blood luminol test.
Here we are in regular light, but it's through a filter. That's why it looks like this. I spray the luminol down this door frame. Now we turn off the lights. Here's the reaction that occurs. The luminol, combined with the blood, gives you these luminescent stains.
Using the luminol spray, Andre Munch finds signs of blood everywhere, blood that has been cleaned up. From the patterns, it is easy to see that there had been a great deal of violence here. But the charred bodies next door show no signs of violent attack. Who had been the victim and who had been the perpetrator? The woman whom Jacques Saint-Pierre had spoken with at the crime scene contacts him. Her concern about the Descharmes couple and their baby has turned into panic. She cautiously agrees to tell him more about the Solar Temple cult, but on one condition, that he keeps her name out of it and refers to her only as Madame X. He agrees.
Through Madame X, I wanted to get information about the Solar Temple cult. What was going on in their minds, and the kind of teachings those people got. All the time I'm trying to understand why such a thing might have happened.
According to Madame X, the cult leaders ruled with an iron fist. They conducted strange ceremonies based on their notion of a medieval sect, the Knights Templar. Members who contributed the most money were made knights. Many of the members of the cult were people of high status, a mayor of a sizable Quebec city, top officials in the Quebec Hydro Company, a well-known journalist, and people with significant family fortunes. One of the Solar Temple leaders was known to have sexual liaisons with some of the women. One of these women was Bernadette Bélanger, who had a child as a result. cult members believe that this child, Emmanuel, was a divine spirit. Jacques St-Pierre asks Madame X about the missing couple, Eddie and Corinne Ducharme. She tells him that they each played a unique role in the cult in Switzerland. Eddie, a handyman by trade, had been in charge of creating phony special effects passed off by the cult leaders as miracles. Corinne Ducharme had made the robes for the strange ceremonies and rituals. But the Ducharmes had begun to suspect the cult leaders for their lavish lifestyles and had questioned where all the donated money had gone. When the cult leaders informed the Ducharmes that they were not meant to be together and that for the good of the solar temple they must split up, it was the last straw. They left the cult's Swiss headquarters, fleeing to their native Quebec. Madame X worried how the cult had reacted to their defection. St-Pierre learns more about the background, but he still needs to make sense of the crime scene, so he turns to arson specialist Carol Rousseau.
Je suis allée acheter dans un magasin à grande surface.
I went to the hardware store to buy a heater, a portable baseboard heater,
une minuterie,
as well as a timer and an aluminum pan,
afin
to understand better how the device worked.
She hopes this will unlock more of the mystery of what happened in the fateful days before and after the deaths, and help to point a finger not only at how the fire had been set, but also who had set it. As Carol examines the devices, she notices what appear to be carbon stains on the edge of one of the aluminum pans, but she still can't quite put it all together. 2 days after the fire, St-Pierre decides to search the apparently undisturbed third chalet. Concealed beneath the stairs, a chilling discovery. The bodies of the Ducharme family are found. Mother, father, and baby all had been brutally murdered. The baby had been stabbed 17 times. A small wooden stake left on its tiny chest.
I immediately went to the scene to see what happened. And let me tell you, it wasn't easy to look at. Any policeman that tells you this kind of thing doesn't touch him, especially when there's a child involved. No, I think it's normal. We're all moved equally by these atrocities.
The location of the bodies is confounding. Why were they stabbed and then concealed next door to the fire in an area not rigged to burn? Who killed them and why so violently? The week after the crime, a car belonging to the Ducharmes is found at the airport. A search through plane tickets around the time of the murders gives investigators the first major break in the case. 4 Swiss citizens, all of whom are linked to the Solar Temple in Switzerland, had flown to Quebec in the week leading up to the fire. 2 had returned to Switzerland the night of the murder. Were they involved? And if so, where are they now? Knowing that at least 4 Swiss cult members had been in Quebec on the night of the murders, Jacques St-Pierre once again needs Madame X to help sort out what might have happened. But first, he has to deliver the devastating news about her friends, the Ducharmes. Her worst fears are confirmed. Now more than ever, Madame X is determined to help St-Pierre solve this twisted crime. Dental records have established the identity of the 2 burned bodies. 35-year-old Alain Lozier and his 60-year-old wife. Both were Swiss members of the cult. Saint-Pierre asks Madame X about the Lausiers. She explains that they were loyal followers who acted as cleanup people. Their job was to make things right.
I think when I met with Madame X, I served a bit as her therapist when she expressed what she had gone through in her years with the Solar Temple.
She reveals that the leaders of the Solar Temple were incensed when the Descharmes left the cult, claiming that the Descharmes baby was the Antichrist and had to be eliminated at all costs. Madame X says that the only person in the cult whom the Descharmes trusted when they left Switzerland had been Bernadette Bélanger, the mother of the cult leader's child. Saint-Pierre knows that Bernadette is one of the 4 people who had come to Quebec just before the murders. Madame X feels that Bélanger might have been used to lure the unsuspecting family into a deadly trap. Finally, the puzzle is all coming together. Investigators can construct a plausible scenario. The Lausiers, Bernadette Bélanger, and another cult member, Paul Carrière, had come over from Switzerland before the murder. The foursome gathered to review their plans. When all was ready, Bernadette Bélanger called the Descharmes, asking them over. Even though the Descharmes were wary of anything to do with the cult, they trusted Bélanger and came to the chalet. Soon after their arrival, one of the cult members asked Eddie Descharmes if he could help with a plumbing problem downstairs. Eddie, being a handyman, agreed to have a look. Once cult members had them apart, the rest of the deadly scheme must have played out very quickly. The murderers moved the Descharmes bodies to the third attached chalet and hid them in the concealed area beneath the stairway. That evening, Bélanger and her partner left for the airport in the Descharmes car. The Lausiers cleaned up the murder scene, washing away the blood. Then Mrs. Lausier went to the middle chalet and took enough sedatives to put herself to sleep, while her husband prepared the fire devices. Mr. Lausier set the timers, joined his wife next door, and took his sedatives. Soon after, the house went up in flames and he died in the fire. By now, Carol Rousseau has determined just how the device works. When the timer reaches the designated hour, it sends power to the heating element, igniting the bundle of matches. A small explosion occurs over the pan of gas and diesel fuel. But she can't figure out why the devices failed to go off in the second house where they were set. The 2 small carbon marks on the edge of one of the pans will help Carol tell the elusive story. A short circuit had occurred when the heating element accidentally touched the edge of the pan. It was enough to render the device useless. There is one final mystery. Why were the Descharmes placed in the third chalet, the one that was not intended to burn down at all? According to the solar temple view of the world, dying amidst flames ensures safe transport to the planet Sirius in a reincarnated state. Madam X explains that if the Descharmes family died by fire, then they too would end up on the planet Sirius, something the cult leaders wanted to prevent. Even in the afterlife, the cult leaders wanted to control their surreal and distorted world. In Switzerland, when the 50 Solar Temple cult members followed in their mass suicide murders, Bernadette Bélanger and her partner, Paul Carrière, were among them. The investigators and scientists agree that this is the most bizarre case they have ever worked. There was no trial, because the likely perpetrators had committed suicide in Switzerland. The only motive for the murders was that the Descharmes dared to be themselves, rather than remain brainwashed followers. Their baby would never see his first birthday. 1 year later, another solar temple fire claimed even more lives. Since there is nothing illegal about the current activities of the cult, police can only watch and wait until the fire alarms go off again.